All right, I think we're live.
Awesome.
All right. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. This is our first podcast of 2021. Hasn't been an eventful week at all anywhere in the world, so we're just moving forward with our podcast. My name is Jennifer West. I'm the artistic director of Muse West Concerts, and I am the host of our podcast, Take Note. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I am a settler located on the unceded and traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, which is now known as Vancouver. My guest today is situated on the traditional territory of the Lenape Nation, which is known as New York City. Music has been made on these lands since time immemorial, and we wish to honor that. Now it is my pleasure to introduce my dear friend and today's guest, pianist Larry Weng. Larry is a winner of the 2019 New York Concert Artist Worldwide Debut Audition and a laureate of the 2016 Reine Elisabeth Concours de Piano. He's an avid chamber musician, soloist, and music educator. Welcome to our podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing okay. It was an early morning. I drove back to New York, so a bit tired, a bit hectic trying to get everything together. But yeah, things are going good. Things are going good.
Great. So some of our audience has met you in concert in 2019 when you played with your brother, Wayne.
That's right. It's a lifetime ago.
It feels like it. It feels
Yeah.
like life kind of stopped 2 months after that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what life was like back then, but
I
I
know.
can look at pictures on my phone and try to
That's
remember.
right.
So, for those people that haven't met you yet, we're going to do a quick rapid fire round of questions for the audience to get to know you.
Sure.
You have to say the answer that first comes to your mind. You're not allowed to overthink this, okay?
Okay. All right.
Mozart or Beethoven?
Beethoven.
That was easy.
You said you're not allowed to think, so going on instinct now.
Good call. Debussy or Ravel?
Ravel.
Oh, that was fast too.
Yeah.
And your favorite post-concert meal?
Ribeye steak.
Ribeye steak. Okay, a good choice. And funny enough, not the first musician to answer steak after performing.
You gotta get your protein.
We'll talk about fitness after. What is the most memorable concert you ever attended in New York?
That's an easy one. Radu Lupu playing solo in Carnegie Hall, second half 960. It was mesmerizing, absolutely mesmerizing. It's the quiet, Carnegie. It's kind of a big place, it's a little big. So, but you've never heard it so quiet before. And no one was breathing. It was incredible. And the thing is, I was way up in the rafters, all the way up, and look who it is, all the way up in the rafters, and you could still hear every inflection and every nuance. It was really, really incredible.
Do you want to introduce us to your cat, please?
Yeah, I guess she knows that we're doing this, so here she is. She wants her attention. Everybody say hi.
Hi, Daisy.
This is the okay. All right. She doesn't want to hear. So that's
Okay,
that's
so
that's that's Daisy Buchanan, my boss.
your boss.
Yeah, my
So
boss.
that's Larry's manager.
That's right. All inquiries go to her.
Yes, Daisy at cats.com.
Sure.
So that's another question. Cats or dogs?
It's a funny question, right? Because I'm actually by nature a dog person. I'm a dog person that ended up with a cat. No, I'm serious. I was never allowed to have pets growing up, and I also had terrible allergies, which I kind of got rid of. But yeah, I couldn't have a dog. I can't have a dog here. My building doesn't allow it, and it's hard in this tiny little closet apartment in New York, to have like the kind of dog that I would like. And so I ended up with a cat, and awesome.
And all inquiries go to Daisy.
That's right.
Last question. Favorite post-concert drink?
This is the drink that you should always have, which is a single malt, neat, not on the rocks, because that is a sin.
So to have the malt whiskey on the rocks is a sin.
Yeah, it's yellow water. You're paying for yellow water. Well, I can find yellow water anywhere.
Especially in New York.
That's right. Exactly. It's plenty abundant over here. So.
It's true. So now that our audience has gotten to know your cat
Yeah.
and some composers and how to drink after a concert, which never happens,
No, no, no. Of course not. Not a thing.
not a thing. It's not a thing that happens. We're going to get into some really nerdy musical questions later. But you have recently picked up sport that you love.
Recently is relative, but sure. Yes, recently.
And, it's something you do to stay healthy when you're not playing Brahms. Tell us a bit about what got you into Muay Thai, because we want our audience to kind of get to know these musicians, not just as these musically nerdy people, which is great, but there's more.
Yeah, for sure. There's something about uh combat sports. Now, a lot of people, will say that they're barbaric or they're this or that. But however, they're yes, I'm not gonna disagree with you there. But at the end of the day, there is something that when you have the most primal of activities, it shows something about people, right? The most basic elements of humanity. And there's also a certain toughness and there's a certain discipline that goes into learning the craft of it. It's not just you just go in there and fling your arms around, right? There's technique, there's strategy, there's conditioning, there's strength, there's all sorts of stuff. um it becomes like a weird little metaphor for life, right? And it's a really hackneyed thing to say, but it is kind of true. Like there's a certain toughness that it instills in you. When you're getting punched in the face repeatedly, it shows you, things are not that bad.
It shows you that maybe memorizing a Brahms sonata isn't the worst thing in the
Yeah,
world.
right, exactly. Like it's a threat perception thing. It's the same thing that I used to do when I had a crazy phase where I was really into powerlifting, and I would lift before concerts. And it was again, it has nothing to do with the physical exertion, but the fact is you have, a bunch of heavy things in front of you or on top of you or threatening to crush you. It really reduces the sense of risk or threat. They're saying walking on stage, that's no problem, right? So
Yeah. I think a lot of students really struggle with that. We try to keep our podcast somewhat related to education, and sometimes we talk about cats, and sometimes we talk about drinking. It's all good. Um, but do you think that this is something that a lot of students need to face? Is that making that first step on stage is not going to kill them, and it's not going to be the end of their life, and they can make it through?
yeah, I think it's really important for students to they need to taste success, but they also need to taste failure, right? The younger the better, because if you just go through life cakewalking and everything's great and all of a sudden, you're handed your first major defeat or setback when you're 18, 19, 20, oh, it's tough. It hurts more.
Resilience is really
Resilient,
important.
right? Resilience and knowing how to take the lump sometimes, right? So yeah, no, and that's the thing is that, like, I always tell my students, it's like these are mistakes that I make. These are mistakes that everybody makes. It's not unique. And of course, when you're in the situation, you feel like, oh, okay, this is my problem. It's not your problem. We all have the same problems. So
So, in other words, they're not special.
yeah, exactly. We're all in the same terrible boat sometimes, right? So
Speaking of all being in terrible boats right now,
yeah.
yeah, we're sending thoughts and maybe prayers to our neighbors in the south.
Yeah, it's I've exhausted my words about that, right? Yeah, that's you know.
It's okay. Let's talk about Brahms. It's much more pleasant.
Yeah, sure.
So, speaking of music and teaching and mentors, who have been some of your musical mentors along the way that have helped your journey to becoming the musician you are today?
I've had that's it's an interesting question because a lot of musicians, they'll have one figure, or they'll have someone who's like incredibly seminal in their life, uh and it will push them in a certain direction because of that contact with one person. I don't actually really feel like I can say that about a single person. I've had a lot of incredible influences along the way, and it's always this kind of piecing together. You get a little bit here, you get a little bit there, and you put it together and try to get a better understanding of what it is you're trying to do. So it's really hard. I always try to stay away from giving one influence, and there's many of them, a preferential treatment. you know,
Mm-hmm.
in your background. So
Because they've all helped,
for
and I
sure, for
I feel
sure.
the same about my piano teachers because I've had, people that I've gone to regularly for a long time, or people that have listened to me a few times and really helped. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a long-term thing. People could meet you at different points of your musical journey.
Right. I mean, it's your mentors, and it's also your peers. I find, uh, there's a saying, there's an iron sharpens iron, right? That that
Yes.
when it's one of the attractions of being here in a place like New York, is that this place is full of people who are incredibly talented and incredibly passionate, and very, very good at what they do. And being just in that context, in that environment, it gives you a little bit of fire inside. It gives you a little bit of, oh, I need to be on my toes.
Yeah, it's a place that I've been to New York 5 times in my life. Um, and the first time I went to New York, I arrived at Port Authority.
It's a wonderful place.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I arrived at 2 in the morning on the Greyhound bus from Montreal.
I've
And
taken that bus many, many times. It was horrible.
it
I'm
was
sorry.
awful. It was really awful. And
Yes.
I get out the bus, and my friend meets me at Port Authority at 2 in the morning, and she's like, let's go eat pizza. And we were like a lot younger, so of course we didn't sleep. Um, and I just, I instantly fell in love with the city. And now there's so many special people to me that live in New York. And whenever I go there, I feel like there's this energy that goes into my body that keeps me buzzing. Even though I'm literally probably exhausted and I don't feel it till I get on the plane home. But I'm always the last one to board the plane at Newark. They're like, okay, last call. And I'm sitting there like, no, I don't want to leave. But I can sense that it's a very special place for musicians to be because there's a lot of competition. And I know that it has been rough on some people because they go there and they don't realize how competitive it is. But how do you feel about that? Do you feel it's too competitive in New York, or is there like a kind community that helps each other?
Uh, uh,
Maybe not kind.
I'll answer the first part of that question first. Um, yeah, no, I mean, competition again, and this is, I guess, something that dulls with age. Um, when and this is the story for a lot of people, I think, and I've talked to a lot of my colleagues about this, and I think they share similar sentiments, which is when you first come in, yeah, a lot of us come from smaller places, and you're kind of like the big shot, hot shot there, and you come to New York, and everybody's that person, right? And the
Hmm.
thing is, it takes a while to realize that those things don't really matter. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of putzing around and doing stupid things until you realize that that doesn't really matter, right? And so uh, having good peers is not just the fact that you can keep motivated, but it's also that having people around that you can trust their judgment. You can trust their judgment. You can trust their ears. And you can respect them. And at the end of the day, that's incredibly important to have that kind of a network, to have that kind of environment around you, because it is hard. Being a musician in this day and age is not exactly the easiest thing to do.
So what you're telling the kids out there is go to medical school?
I did not say that. I would never say that.
It's a very difficult career, and a lot of people they come to me asking like, is this what my kid should do? Is this what I should do? And I just tell them the truth. I'm like, well, yes, but just be prepared for a bit of a bumpy ride.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and it's also here's one. Okay, speaking of mentors, here's one that was very influential and who has been, was a former teacher and someone that I've known for over 20. No, wow, 20 years. I'm old. Um,
You keep saying that.
yeah, it's crazy. Those words are just, it's shocking. Um, yeah. So my first week in New York, studying with Jerome Lowenthal, and he told me, look, if you're coming here and you have the notion that you're gonna become rich and famous playing the piano, walk out that door now. right?
Yeah, it's
If you
true.
have it, but if you have other reasons to stay here and learn, then stay, and you will for sure learn. Um, and this is, but you have to, now talking about advice to younger generations, you really have to find something worth doing in it. It's not just a means to something else, or else it's hard to keep that fire going for it. Yeah.
And that is something that I hope a lot of our young students tune into our podcasts later. Sunday afternoons are usually at their lessons, but a lot of them tune in. They tune in after, and I think that's really important. Is that if you don't have that fire, it's perhaps not the best place to be. It's a challenge. Speaking of music, you're going to be performing for us a virtual lecture recital. So for those that are new to the game, this is on Friday, January 29th. I was about to say 2020, but it's not 2020 anymore.
Kind of feels like it's still 2020, doesn't it?
No, I literally feel like we're stuck on the last day of 2019, and it's
Yeah.
been a nightmare the whole time, but it's okay because we have Brahms. So, for those that are new to the game, what is a lecture recital, and how is it different than a concert?
Well, I mean, a lecture recital can be any kind of format, but essentially the idea is that you give some background, not just background, but more a narrative, a way of framing what it is that you're going to be playing. Well, that's the idea, is to make the music a little bit more accessible, because let's be honest, it's a borderline 50-minute piece, and that's not exactly the easiest thing to say to someone. Here, sit down, enjoy. Yeah, I mean, it's great music, and I can tell you 100 different ways why, and that's kind of the idea, right? And this is kind of going against what Brahms would say, right, himself about absolute music. But
Yes.
the idea is that education and um, presenting people with a fascinating way of looking for material and things in the music, it gives them a richer listening experience. And so the idea behind this particular lecture recital is that it was an idea that came to me when I was starting learning the piece. It's the Beethoven year, and I was supposed to. Well, it was a plan of mine. I was supposed to have a recital in Weil Hall this year, and that obviously didn't happen. But the recital, the conception behind the recital was that it was going to be an homage concert to Beethoven that didn't overtly feature Beethoven. And so I was thinking in my head, what pieces allude to Beethoven in a very obvious way? And wow, does the Brahms do that? I mean, it's really clear from the very opening. It's something very, very, very heavy on his mind when he's writing this piece. And the more I looked into it, the more I learned the piece, the more I thought it was a very interesting narrative. There's a narrative to the piece. There's a slightly poetic narrative about the relationship of mentor and student, or inspiration, and the newer generation of artists. And so I thought it was fascinating, and it's something that for me enriched how I looked and learned the piece, and I thought would probably help the audience listen and appreciate the music more. So that's what this lecture recital is about.
Well, we're pretty excited um, for this on Friday. I'm going to keep saying the date and time so that, they say you need to say things 3 times for people to get it. So
Is that like a Candyman thing?
it probably is. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
So Friday, January 29th, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, which means after dinner drinks for friends on the East Coast, watch with dinner for us on the West Coast. I'll be making salmon. Delicious West Coast salmon. But we're really excited, and we're so grateful for that concert and looking forward to it. You were a bit hesitant to do online concerts. Tell me more about why.
It, you know, because I think there are already enough people screaming into the void. Now
Wow, that's
that's
perfect.
yeah, it's a half facetious answer, but it's kind of half heartfelt as well, right? Uh, I'm never one to toot my own horn, and when things are hitting the fan, colloquially. It's a little bit hard to take yourself seriously when you're saying, "Hey, look at me," right? And so if you can do something positive and if you can give in some way, then it's great. And I'm not, of course, I'm not denigrating people who did it, or who for them was a way, it was a way of expressing themselves. But for me, it didn't feel right at the moment. And also, I was kind of burnt out. There's two different conflation of events that was kind of made me lay low for a little bit, rethink some priorities, start learning some new music, and
Yeah.
doing more teaching, and finding other ways to be productive and to use this. You can't really call it a profession, this crazy obsession that musicians have to do the insane thing they do. So
A crazy obsession that they turn into a profession
yeah,
eventually.
patchwork, right? Exactly. It's one little tile at a time, like a crazy mosaic.
And I know what you mean about screaming into the void, because at the beginning, everything was just like people in their living room with their phone going live on Facebook.
Yeah.
And um, it's just evolved so much. I just watched, and I'm still processing this amazing concert I just watched from the Place des Arts, Maison
Mm-hmm.
Symphonique in Montreal,
Mm-hmm.
with the OSM. Hi, Andy. Hi, Brian, if you're listening. And they played Brahms' First Symphony, and we're going to talk about that symphony in a little bit. Don't worry. And the tech was so amazing, and they had their new conductor, and it was so uplifting. But I don't think at the beginning of this pandemic that people were envisioning that we would still be here a year later.
That's right.
So people were like, oh, I'll just do a little living room concert. And now it's like, no, we're back to full-time work, and this is how we're sharing music with people.
Right.
So it's been cool. Speaking of Brahms, one of my favorite composers, not to play.
Yeah, he's not so nice to pianists.
No, really, honestly, he's not. I get
Well,
pretty fed up.
there's a reason for it. We can talk about that, but there's definitely a reason for it. It's not sadistic. Let me put it that way. It's not sadistic.
Who's the most sadistic composer to pianists?
I don't know, probably Ligety.
Good
Yeah.
point.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Somewhere in that vein, probably someone like Ligety, because
Yeah,
the computational power you need is just it's beyond physical difficulty. It's this,
yeah, it's
right?
mental.
You need to be processing way too much information.
So you've picked one composer for this recital. First of all, that's pretty gutsy, actually. It's like this is the whole meal. This is the menu. Although we'll talk about the sonata in a little bit, because that sonata has many different courses.
Mm-hmm.
5 course meal.
Mm-hmm.
Just 6 short of Chinese New Year meal. So why Brahms? Why did you pick Brahms?
there, there's something wonderful about Brahms, and it's wonderfully underspoken. It's sometimes hard to recognize that in his music, because it is so full. It has such vitality. It has such, you can list 100 different adjectives. It's so full of stuff. But I think the most poignant thing about Brahms' music, at least for me, is that he's able to leave the most poignant things unsaid. It's always
Mm-hmm.
hanging around there. You think about 117, 118. It's those things, those heartbreaking silences.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really it's so evocative and beautiful about Brahms, and it's very fascinating because Brahms is so almost like the other side of the coin for Schumann, who, when I was younger, I loved to play Schumann. I still love Schumann. Schumann is really absolutely one of my favorite composers. It's so uniquely vulnerable and uniquely honest in how he writes. The insanity, the passion, the dejection, the depression. It's all earnest. There is no filter. This is a guy with no filter. But
Which is
on the
amazing.
right, it's amazing, and it burned him out. Right, it's just it's very obviously took his toll.
Hmm.
However, on the other side of the coin, Brahms, who was equally as amazing but in such a different way, right, studied, academic, or all the stereotypes that people had from him during his day would say that he was dry academic, he was a learned composer,
A
but
porcupine.
right, and so difficult to music that was difficult, music that was really well put together, really thought out. But beyond it, it's in a weird way the complement to Schumann's incredible earnesty, right? Is Brahms's ambivalence.
I do feel sometimes when I'm listening to Brahms, like he does present the emotions that he's feeling, but he doesn't actually 100% let us in. Where when I listen to the Schumann fantasy, I almost feel like I should be not watching this intimate moment between him and Clara.
Right, right, right,
I feel like I should be turning away, like this is not my moment, but he
right.
lets us in.
Right. That's why it's remarkably vulnerable. And it's neither it's this is not a value judgment, right? It's not that one is better than the other. And it's just that it's just they're so in many ways so similar, but they express it so differently. And again, a lot of this might be because I have this incredibly warm reading of their biographical, their life stories,
Hmm.
right? And they're the two of them are kind of tied together by Clara, and
Yes.
it's a sad, beautiful story. There was apparently back in the day a movie about this moment when Brahms arrives at the doorstep of the Schumann's household, and Mr. Claude Frank used to tell this story all the time. So he would reenact the scene from the movie, and he would sit down and play. I think it was the Opus 79 Brahms Rhapsodies.
Great pieces.
Yeah, and so that memory, it kind of lingers for me, and so it all comes together to have this kind of um no music and no preference for whatever music you like can be separated from your past with it, right? So your
Yes.
experiences and the environments and the things that you've been taught all come together to form your preferences for something. And so for me, that idea that they're kind of they share some kind of a bond and
Hmm.
not only their music but in their lives, it's incredibly attractive, and it's something that is very heartwarming. You think about the slow movement of the D minor piano concerto, which some say was written as a kind of a portrait of grieving Clara after Robert's death. Things like this, it's really quite heartbreaking. And whether or not this is I don't want to encourage students to be reading biographical data into from the composer's lives into how they interpret pieces, right?
Hmm.
But
But it's
it
possible.
is possible, right?
And it's so interesting you mentioned Claude Frank because that was the first ever solo piano recital I went to. This was in my first year of university, which was only 2 years ago. Kidding. We're all getting old, aren't we?
Yeah, yeah. Well, time marches on.
For those of you that are going to listen to this, Larry is laughing at me right now, but that's okay. So the first concert I ever heard of a solo recital was Claude Frank, and he played Opus 111, a few Chopin nocturnes, and the second half was 960.
Mm,
And I could not believe my ears. It was the first time I'd heard 960. And I went back to my dorm and I just sat in silence. And I phoned my mom the next morning and I said, Mom, I need to go back to piano lessons and I need to go back like next week. And she's like, You quit 2 years ago in high school. You wanted to play sports and go hang out with boys. And I was like, I just want to play piano now. I don't need sports. Which isn't true. Kids out there, do your activities and do piano. Do both. You need to be
yes,
healthy.
please.
Do your sports. But 960 and that performance just, it kind of altered my course a little bit.
Well, he was a special musician, and
Yeah.
a special person. Incredibly warm-hearted. Um, he kind of radiated this love for music, and yeah, he had a really special place in the music community, in the Yale community, all over the place. So
Did you get to play for him?
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So a few times, and it was just he is incredibly positive, and it's something super uplifting about playing for someone who has that kind of presence and that kind of when he sits down and demonstrates, even towards the end when his hands would barely work and he was still playing. It was just beautiful playing. real
Yeah.
humanity and honesty in how he plays. So
Yeah, that's what I remember about that recital. I also remember it was snowing really hard in Edmonton and it was really cold going home. But
that sounds par for the course, huh?
it is par for the
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
So, this sonata of Brahms that you've picked is a little bit unusual. For everybody out there, this is about to get music nerdy, so grab another drink. Most sonatas have 3 or 4 movements, depending on the era. This one has 5. That's kind of weird. Can you tell us a bit more about this sonata?
Yeah, it's the so Brahms in many ways Brahms would kind of follow the outline of Schumann's compositional career too, in kind of focusing on genres. And in the beginning, and similarly like Schumann, in the very beginning of his career, the first 28 opuses are piano opuses, right? And this is how he made his mark early on, is writing piano pieces. And Brahms did the same thing. And he was more diversified. He wrote some piano violin music and things like that. But the majority of his output in the very beginning, the early opuses in uh, are piano solo pieces. And this sonata, the Opus 5, is the third of his 3 sonatas. And it's really interesting to think that he only wrote 3 sonatas, and they're all right in the beginning of his career, and then he never came back.
He let it go.
He let it go, and it's not surprising, and I'll explain why that is. Is that uh, as I said, as I'm gonna say in the lecture, I'll give a little preview. Is that Schumann kind of announced Brahms to the world, and he said that this will be the composer who picks up the mantle of Beethoven. Now, just think about Think
This
about that.
guy.
Think about that for a few minutes. I mean, if think about this is about what 20 years after Beethoven's death. Even in that period of time, he had become a larger than life figure. He was already a legend, and he so dominated the discourse of music that it kind of precipitated the War of the Romantics that would happen between Schumann and Brahms's conservative side and the Wagner Liszt camp, right? And both
Yeah.
sides claiming heir to Beethoven's legacy. So it's no surprise that after really thoroughly dipping his hands into the genre that really was Beethoven's bread and butter, right? When you think about Beethoven, it's his sonata forms. I mean, it's the
32 of
insane,
them.
not just the piano sonatas, the cello sonatas, the violin sonatas, the string quartets. These are all sonata form pieces as well. The
Symphonies.
symphonies, the piano concerti, the other. It just go down the list. The mastery of sonata form, that he achieved, it's like no other. It's just absolute transcendent mastery of a form. And for someone like Brahms, who was so studied, so careful, so attentive to craftsmanship, he said that inspiration without craftsmanship is a reed shaken in the wind. And for him, craftsmanship was of the utmost importance. And so he had to conquer this kind of the staple form. And
Sure.
I think there was this doubt that he had planted in him from the very young age. And if you see the correspondence that he had with Schumann right after Schumann wrote that kind of headlining article about him, he said, "I don't know how I'm going to ever live up to these expectations."
In the Neues Outschrift für Musik, in that
Yeah,
article.
yeah, right. And Brahms replied privately to Schumann immediately after that was published, saying, "I don't know how I'm going to do this." And so this idea of having to take this legacy and this mantle down from someone as great as Beethoven, he just it in many ways it crushed him. And so he really felt that urge and that need to live up to something that in many ways was in his head.
And I think that it's so interesting that, on a podcast where we're talking about Brahms, Beethoven is already brought up and he's already called the master of this form. And I guess that kind of gives us an idea of what Brahms was living with in his own head.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
Schubert too. Schubert lived with this, and
that's right.
he said, "Bury me beside my master."
Right. It's a figure. There are a few figures in, and this is something I've been that's been percolating in my mind about a course that I want to eventually develop. There are a few figures throughout history that cause this kind of crisis in people, right?
Yeah.
A slightly Hegelian way of looking at music history, but yeah, but it's there. Another one's Wagner, right?
Yes.
Wagner, love him, hate him, there had to be a response. There was no getting around the gigantic kind of gravity well that was Wagner's influence. And the same thing with Beethoven, who to Wagner, Beethoven was the influence. You see, and there was just this kind of chain reaction of people that love him, hate him, doesn't matter. You have to reply, and you have to, in your own way, work out the influence that these seminal figures have upon your own craft. You know, think Debussy and Wagner kind of exercising the ghost of Bayreuth, as he called it.
Yes.
Right.
There is a ghost at Bayreuth. I'm sure there must be many ghosts.
Right.
So for people tuning in to the concert on Friday, January 29th at 6 p.m., what can they listen for in this sonata?
Well, as you said, it's 5 movements, which is an odd number of movements. And then, but when you really look into it, it's actually not. The extra movement, and this is something, remember, Brahms was 20 when he wrote this piece. 20. Mind blown.
So young.
He was 20
so
when he
young.
wrote this piece. But even in his youth, you can see the well measured out thought that and planning that went into the music. And the extra movement is, in my estimation, this is now my fanciful thinking, is in a way his own response of sorts to the very beginning of the last movement of the Ninth Symphony, in which all of the material from previous movements are drudged up and then cast aside as the ode to joy becomes increasingly clear in the cello and the basses, right? And this is something that he kind of does in that intermezzo movement. The Rückblick. Rückblick means to look back, to reminisce. And this is exactly it. He brings back material from previous movements and he ties them together. And the materials that dominate the previous movements, in large part, are references and homages to Beethoven. And he ties up this storyline so that the final movement, the 5th movement, it's he's free but alone. And if you watch, that's right. If you watch the lecture, you'll actually know what that means. So I'll leave it there.
And we will encourage everyone to watch the lecture and recital. And I want to talk about this lecture and recital were filmed in a pretty special place, in a very cold but special setting.
It was a difficult working condition.
Did your fingers freeze?
Yeah, it was very cold. I kept on running them under hot water, and that doesn't really help. And I was, in somewhat formal attire, so I couldn't actually, do some exercise to get myself warmed up. But no, it was it's a working space, so it has a bit of that air of authenticity to it. So
it was filmed in a workshop in Yonkers, which is just outside of the Bronx, right?
Yeah,
North. Okay. And you have recently, with some colleagues, started a wonderful company called Il Bel Canto Piano. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit more about Il Bel Canto Piano and what is your vision for that?
Sure. This was almost serendipity. How this happened was that, I have to really thank my esteemed former roommate Weng for introducing Tali Mahanur to me. And Tali is my one of my business partners in this venture, and she is a tuner, technician, and rebuilder extraordinaire. She is incredible. Her knowledge of pianos and Steinways and chickerings and all sorts of things related to the keyboard instruments is, knows no equal, really. And so I was lucky enough, and because my piano at that time, which Wayne had been so courteously practicing for years.
Wayne, are you listening to this? Because you're in trouble now.
He said he would be later. He's busy right now, apparently. But the piano needed work. And he suggested that I get in contact with Tali because she had done such great work for Wayne's friend Adam. And so that's how we met. And she worked on my this baby over here, this my 1927 Stanley M. Um, Phenomenal. I mean, just what was done with the instrument and the life and the tone that she breathed back into it. It was staggering to me that this could be done with an instrument. And so I got to know her and talk really a lot more about these instruments, about what was really the golden age. And it's thrown around a lot, but there's a modicum to truth to this, which is that there was a period of time when the craftsmanship and the care and attention that Stanley provided to their pianos was at an all-time high. And it was those during these this piano 1927 is right, towards the tail end of this period. And it's just incredible instruments that really, when they're given the attentive restoration that they deserve, are just superior instruments. I mean, just some of these instruments. I have you missed seeing the Steinway C. If this was yesterday, I would have still been in Boston. And there's our Steinway C. They're from 1894. Just beautiful instruments. And so I became so interested in the craft of it, in all the parts of the piano and how the piano works and what it is that goes into restoration, that I wanted to somehow, become a part of it and help them expand their business, because their work really deserves a larger audience. They just do amazing things. And so between me and my other business partners currently, we are trying to expand the market for these pianos that we have. And it's a small operation. We're not a large, it's not like a factory rebuilding. We don't do thousands of pianos at a time, but everyone that she touches, it's a gem. So we want to share that with people.
And inquiries can go through Daisy again.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, if you wanna learn more, it's belcantopiano.com, and there's our video about what we do, and the work that goes up in our workshop in Yonkers. And it's wonderful stuff. So it's something that
Nice.
I never it's something that I never saw coming. But I guess that's a lot of life. There's things kind of work their way out the way that they work out.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And I've seen pictures of the workshop, and I've seen and heard the pianos being played. Um, and it's really beautiful, beautiful work. And having visited Steinway factory in New York, actually, I visited that factory with you. I remember
Hmm.
that at way too early o'clock in the morning.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I also have visited the Fazioli factory in Italy. So next time, I look forward to seeing the space where Il
Yeah.
Bel Canto is.
It's definitely more, how shall I say it, rustic. Um, there's I have a real love for these kind of spaces where it's very clearly a working space. There's nothing manicured about it. It's rough and tumble, but there's an incredible beauty to it, because it's a space. There's probably 200, 300 pianos up there in in various stages of restoration. It's just a kind of a unique it's a unique environment, for sure.
Very inspirational, for sure. Sounds really cool. A few more questions.
Hmm.
Now, we've talked a little bit about online concerts, and at the beginning of the pandemic, people were clicking live on their phones and just playing for people, and it was wild. It was like the freaking Wild West out there. But how has your experience been? Like, how have you pivoted to teaching online? Do you have students in different places now?
Yeah, teaching online. And do know I've had some experience teaching online even before this. So in many ways, it was just a ramping up of some of the work that I had already been doing. Yeah, it is a different experience. You do it a couple times a week, it's okay. And then when it becomes like you have a 5 hour day of being on Zoom straight, it's a little bit of a different experience.
Yeah.
It's hard. I find I've been very impressed with how my students have managed it. It's difficult, and it's difficult, as difficult as it is for me. It's more difficult for them. So you try to understand, but you also try not to allow things to slip in ways that are unacceptable, right? But I mean, it's difficult, especially for the younger students, the ones who are just beginning. It's a it's a tough place to begin their educational process. So
I have a new 4-year-old student. She's so cute. And her mom said, can we just wash our hands and wear masks? Because we don't think online will work for her. She just turned 4. And I said, you're probably right. It probably won't work. So we just have like health guidelines in the studio, and it's impossible. She's only 4.
it's very difficult. It's a real struggle, and that's the real shame about this whole thing, is that these younger kids that are coming up right now, and they're 4 or 5, they're really at the prime of their absorbing information stage. Their minds are pliant, right? And this is the time to be learning new skills and stuff. It's a difficult time for them, so I really empathize. So you
It's
try to
tough.
you try to do the best that you can. So that's all you can really hope for, right?
And I think that it's been interesting to see how different people are able to make connections. Like, I know that my piano teacher in Oakville, hi Chris, and my voice teacher in Toronto, hi Dr. Bob. I've never met them in person, and the bond we've created is incredible. I see these people once a week, and they've improved my singing and my playing, and it's pretty remarkable. I think people have been so versatile, and I think that people with a positive attitude have kind of just forged forward, and the skill set that some of us have now, it's going to be pretty incredible moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. There's always again, I hate to trade in platitudes, but there is a silver lining to all of it, right?
That's true. We're going to end our interview with a few desert island questions that we ask a lot of our
Oh
guests.
boy.
So let's pretend that you're isolated.
That's hard to pretend. Yeah. So real reach, mental gymnastics.
It's a real reach to imagine we're all isolated right now. So imagine you're on a desert island that you've been allowed to travel. Now that is a reach.
It's sounding like paradise right now.
Yes, for sure. You're on a desert island. What are 2 recordings that you can't live without?
I think, yeah, all right. It's a current. Are we talking now? Are we talking in this moment? Or are we talking like historically?
I'm talking like you're on the Hudson River, you're on a trip, and you've been lost, and now you're on a desert island.
Uh,
Like today you're on this island.
okay. All right. Let's go. Let's go. This is today's answer then. Let's go with Carlos Kleiber's Beethoven 5 and 7,
Oh, good call.
and Beatles Abbey Road.
Okay, wasn't expecting the non-classical.
I'm full of surprises.
This is true. There will be some great surprises for our concert on the 29th as well. And so, another question about the desert island. If you're on a desert island, you only have 3 cooking supplies with you. What are the 3 cooking supplies that you have to bring today? So, what are you craving for? What do you want to cook today?
See, the thing is, I was thinking a lot more practical. First, you need a really sharp knife. Just
That is such a you answer.
You need a really sharp knife, because there's nothing worse than a dull knife, even on a desert island. Would drive me nuts. Really sharp knife, which would also include a whetstone, I guess, right?
Yeah.
A cast iron skillet, and then
Okay.
some surefire way to start a fire. Everything else you can just improvise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are good supplies.
There you go.
And the last desert island question, what are 2 non-classical types of music that you need to survive?
That's really, it's all over. That's all over the place. It's constantly shifting, but jazz is for sure one of them. And the other one is probably gonna be some kind of a tie between old school rap and flamenco guitar. It's a weird selection of choices. Nothing in common.
Old school rap and flamenco guitar, these are so far from each other. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, you should have heard my playlists I had in college. They were very strange.
Was it from Tupac to Brandenburg concertos by any chance?
No, it was more like Tupac, Bill Evans, Paco Lucia, and then maybe some Beethoven, something like that. It's a strange collection of music.
That sounds like a good playlist to have, actually.
Yeah, yeah, it's not bad, not too bad.
Muse West should do some hip hop at some point, but
Yes, yes, that would be great.
maybe my board of directors are not listening to this right now. It's been such a delight to speak to my dear friend Larry Weng live from New York. Daisy has probably gone to nap.
She's on the piano. Yes.
Oh, she's on the piano. Okay.
Yeah, she's regained her spot because in Boston she's not allowed on the piano. So.
Okay. Does she play C major yet?
No, she knows how to play one note. I've gotten her to play one note, but it's only when she feels like it.
That sounds like a cat's life.
And there you go. She's the boss.
She's the boss. We have a few people to thank to close off our podcast. For this wonderful microphone, we would like to thank Tom Lee Music. And I would like to thank my podcast editor, Josh Short, who has been so patient with my questions like, where does the USB plug in? Okay, maybe not that bad, but along those lines. And I would like to thank Larry for being here today and the concert on Friday, January 29th. Tickets are available on our website. You won't want to miss this concert of Brahms with a wonderful lecture before. And it's been great to speak with you. And
you too.
Thanks. And a reminder to everybody to check out our podcast on Spotify and Apple. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.